So on today's lesson, the topic is going to be shuffles. Now, in this particular lesson, we're not going to talk about false shuffles. We're not going to talk about different sleights and different ways to falsify these shuffles. We're just going to talk about the shuffles themselves. Each and every single subsequent shuffle is going to have its own particular lesson because, to be honest, there's a world of information for just the riffle shuffle. There is a universe of information for the overhand shuffle. There's a lot of different moves of the Hindu shuffle, and each one of these moves is going to be falsifiable in some sense, and it's going to need its own lesson in order to be fully appreciated. So the first shuffle that we're going to talk about here is the shuffle that you see most commonly done, which is going to be the riffle shuffle. Now, this could have a cascade at the end. It doesn't necessarily have to have one, but if you notice a couple things that are pretty much echoing things that I've talked about in previous lessons, nowhere is there any sort of crimp on the cards. Nowhere is there any sort of excess bend on the cards. You would think that with a shuffle that is essentially bending the cards, you would have some sort of imperfection on the cards afterwards, or they will be mangled. But you see that they're not. And the reason for that is because I'm always using a light touch. And that's what kind of sets apart somebody who's just starting off with Magic into somebody that's been around for a long time, is that light touch. So in order to accomplish the riffle shuffle and not bend the cards, you're going to need a couple things. So first of all, you're going to hold the cards in right-hand biddle grip, just like this. So notice my fingertips are kind of going to be a little bit deeper than usual for this particular grip. And the reason being is that you want to do the shuffle in your hands. Now, if you do have some sort of technique where you do want to play this clumsy character that doesn't necessarily know how to shuffle cards, it's understandable to have the cards shuffled on your knee if that facilitates with, for example, doing a false riffle shuffle, or shuffle the cards on the table. That's if you don't want to necessarily show skill. However, for most purposes, and if you want to falsify the shuffle, you're going to need to learn how to do the shuffle in your hand. So we're going to have it in biddle grip. However, it's going to be a little bit more of a deeper biddle grip. You notice that my ring finger and my middle finger are bracing the card from underneath. And the reason for that is that when I riffle off cards, notice that my left hand comes in here, and I'm just touching the cards over here, approximately in the middle. What that's going to do is that when I allow those cards to revolve into that left hand, all I'm doing is letting gravity do its work. I'm not doing any sort of extra action here. I'm just letting gravity do its work as I revolve the cards. So now I'm in the same exact grip with both hands. So one more time, you're just going to hold the cards in a little bit deeper of a biddle grip. You're going to use your thumb to riffle off as your finger of the left hand makes contact with the face of the card underneath the deck. You're going to let gravity do its job and revolve that half into the left hand. So you're going to be in the same exact grip. Notice it's kind of a deeper grip. And the reason for this is that when you complete the shuffle, that deep grip allows for the cards to remain in the hand and not on the floor. So that's a definite hot tip. So what's going to happen, one more time, you're riffling up, and all that simply is that you're just using your thumb to riffle up. You could just practice doing this sort of action. You could practice doing this sort of action. But ultimately, what you're doing is just using your thumb to strum and riffle up approximately half the cards. Now, it does help if you do it in the corner. That usually helps when you're starting off, but then doing it in the middle also has the same effect. So you're going to let gravity do its work. You're going to revolve the cards. So now you're in the same exact position with both hands. Now what's going to happen is that you're going to practice being in this sort of grip without the necessity to have the cards on the table. Now the tendency when you're first learning this is that the cards are going to fall and you're going to lose control over the cards. As long as you maintain this grip and you have these fingertips underneath in a sort of a straddle grip that we talked about in one of the first lessons, the cards are going to stay in your hand. So you're going to do the same action, notice, with the left hand as you do with the right hand. Both forefingers are going to be ready to bend the cards, but you're not crimping the cards. You're just bending it enough so that you could riffle it with both thumbs. So you're going to put a little bit of pressure there. For some false shuffles later, this grip is going to be modified, and these fingers are going to be in the front to hide the action. However, for this one, because it's a regular riffle shuffle, you're just going to have the cards here. And you're going to use both thumbs to simultaneously riffle off cards into each other. Now, when you're first learning this, you're not going to have even shuffle. You're not going to have an even sort of cascade. What's going to happen is that the cards are going to come in clumps. That's going to be completely normal. So what's going to happen is that as you practice this action, the cards are going to start running singly, and you're going to see that you're going to have control over your fingertips, and you're pretty much going to be able to shuffle the cards eventually one after the other. Now, that's not necessary by any sort of means, but it does allow for a more even cascade at the end when the cards are evenly distributed. But don't worry if those cards are just falling in clumps in the beginning. That's totally fine, and that's totally normal. So what you're trying to accomplish is that you are going to try to bend the cards and riffle them off into each other so that you could square it up. That's going to be the first sort of thing and the first hurdle that you need to accomplish. So you're just going to bend the cards like this, and you're going to be able to shuffle them and push them in neatly together. The next thing that you want to be able to do is the waterfall, or that cascading action. The way we do that is that we're going to get into the same action as the riffle shuffle. The only difference is that now your thumb, both thumbs, are going to be around the middle of this situation over here. Again, your fingers are underneath, bracing, because you are going to use your thumb to simultaneously put downward pressure as your fingertips put upward pressure. That's kind of the big secret to doing this, because usually people neglect to talk about the thumbs, and what happens is that the cards just separate. You don't want that. So you're going to need to put a little bit of downward pressure with the thumbs as you're putting upward pressure with the fingertips. And what that's going to allow, if you have the cards let go, is a sort of waterfall or cascading action that you see typically done. Now, if you do this, make sure that you just let the cards do the work themselves. You don't want to put any extra pressure, because that's what's going to end up crimping the cards. So if you just allow the cards to do their own work, you're going to have successfully completed a riffle shuffle with a cascading action in your own hands, and no necessity for your knee, like I've typically seen done, or the table itself. So that's the first shuffle, and that's the riffle shuffle in itself. Now, the cool thing about the riffle shuffle is that you don't really need to put extra work in order to preserve the top card. Now, I know I said that I'm going to teach more in depth in future lessons. However, the riffle shuffle is kind of unique, because if you just keep a little bit of attention on the top card, you could keep it on top and supposedly shuffle the rest of the deck. Same thing applies for the bottom card. So all that's happening here is that I'm letting that card fall last as I'm doing the riffle shuffle. So again, in this very simple action, you're not changing anything other than allowing that right-handed card to fall last. You have successfully done a very easy riffle shuffle, false shuffle, retaining the top card or even the top couple cards. So if you have the 4 aces on top and you just let a couple cards stay, you could complete the same action and you have a little bit of the top stock preserved in that riffle shuffle. So the next shuffle is going to be the overhand shuffle. And the way this is done is that you're going to hold the cards in the biddle grip, but in the right hand. But you notice that the biddle grip usually is with the cards face down. This time I'm going to hold the cards kind of face up in this biddle grip position. Now, the modification to this is that you're going to have your forefinger on top as opposed to curled in the back. So what this is going to allow for is that you're going to have your thumb of the left hand peel off different packets, just like this, or even run cards singly. This is called running. This is what we talked about in the last video on terminology. So when they say to shuffle off, what that means is that you are just shuffling off like normal. However, when a text or magician says to run off, for example, 5 cards, that means to run 5 cards singly in succession. So an overhand shuffle is just pretty much you're holding the cards in this sort of grip. If you want, you can have your forefinger there bracing the cards, or you could have it up here. It doesn't really matter. And your thumb of your left hand is coming in and grabbing packets of cards and putting it into the left hand. So you could grab singles, you could grab packets, but what this is doing is that you are just distributing the cards and pretty much giving a rapid succession of cuts. This is actually less shuffling than is actually going on with a deck of cards, but it appears to most spectators like there's a lot of shuffling going on. However, there's actually very little shuffling taking place, and you're going to take advantage of this in the trick that I'm going to show you guys later on. So one more time, you're just holding the cards in this sort of grip in your right hand, using your left thumb to bring in packets, and you're letting those packets fall on top of each other so that ultimately you end up with a somewhat reasonably shuffled deck in your left hand. Now, what you want to avoid when doing this overhand shuffle is you want to avoid, again, gripping the cards too hard. Whenever I see somebody that doesn't usually handle a deck do an overhand shuffle, you see that they're mashing onto the cards, and you see this because you see this sort of flowing action in the right hand. It's completely unnecessary. Conversely, you don't want to have too loose of a grip because then the cards are just going to fall out of your hand. So you want to make sure that you have an even pressure on the cards and that when you are bringing your thumb over, you're actually fully clearing the cards. One thing that I do see often too is this sort of action where the cards don't fully clear. You do want to make sure that you clear the card before coming in and grabbing another packet to shuffle. The next shuffle that I'm going to show you guys is the Hindu shuffle. The Hindu shuffle is pretty much the same thing as an overhand shuffle, only done from the short end. So instead of holding the cards in this sort of brittle grip, you're going to use your right hand to grab the card at the lower, smaller edge on the lower side. You see this? Now your finger is going to be here or here, depending on whatever move you want to do. But usually it's curled on top, resting on the top card itself. So you're going to hold the cards in this grip. Again, I'm not squeezing anything. I'm not putting more pressure. Your left hand is going to come in. And again, much like the overhand shuffle, this time you're going to use both your forefinger and your thumb, or your middle finger and your thumb, to grab packets from the top, just like this. You're going to grab a packet from the top and drop that off into your left hand. Grab a packet, let that fall into your left hand. Now, the first thing that you want to do when doing the shuffle is you want to have an even sort of distribution of the cards. You don't want this action where it seems like you're, just pulling the cards. You want to make sure that it's a very light action. You're just pulling the cards and letting them fall onto your hand, just like this. Don't worry about speed in the beginning. You don't have to do this fast. The kind of struggle is to want to immediately do this fast. You don't want to do that in the beginning. You want to take this slow, and you want your fingertips to develop that strength, that muscle necessary, that muscle memory as well, for the shuffle to actually not look choppy or blocky or look like you're putting excess pressure in the cards. So one more time, just taking package from the top, letting it fall. Taking package from the top, letting it fall. Taking package from the top, letting it fall, just like this. So you notice it's pretty much the same situation as an overhand shuffle where you have different packets of cards, however, in clumps. However, if you keep the deck in new deck order and you do an overhand shuffle or you do a Hindu shuffle and you spread the cards, you see how little, has double backer, you see how little work has actually been done on the cards. You're going to notice that it's not actually a really thorough shuffle. It's just pretty much mixing several chunks of cards in a deck, but it's not really accomplishing much. And that you're going to take advantage of in a lot of tricks. So that's the Hindu shuffle. So the next shuffle is going to be the Pharaoh shuffle. The way that looks is just like this. You're having the cards being, you're pushing the cards and weaving them together in a way that you could actually cascade them at the end, or just push them together in a way that's accomplishing pretty much the same as a riffle shuffle, only without that riffling action. So this is actually a shuffle that I've seen very often done by lay people, however, done incorrectly. When lay people do it, it's typically either from this sort of grip, which is, again, not incorrect, but it's done with more pressure than necessary, and that usually damages cards. Again, another way that I've seen this is done from an overhand grip. By the way, that's a gimmick card. That's actually printed on there. So the way I've seen lay people do this is in this sort of way, combining an overhand shuffle and a riffle shuffle. This way will definitely damage your cards, so you want to avoid doing that. So as far as the Pharaoh shuffle itself, again, light touch. You want to have a very light touch. You're going to grab the cards in a mechanic's grip. You're going to come in with your right hand, and you're going to break off approximately half the deck. There's no necessity to have a perfect cut in for this particular thing. You see that some magicians are able to do this dead cut every time, 26-26. We don't need to do that when we're first learning to shuffle. So we're just going to cut around the middle. And also, cool point here is that depending on the way your deck was cut, it's going to be easier or harder to shuffle the cards face up and face down. So you want to experiment with your deck and try to shuffle the deck face up and face down and see which way is easier. And whichever way is easier, just keep doing it that way when you're first learning, so that the shuffle doesn't is not hindered by the actual cut of the cards itself. So for example, with this deck, it's a little bit harder to shuffle with the cards face up because they were cut in a different way. So these cards are worn in, so that's not going to be an issue as much anymore. But you're going to see that when you first get a deck and you try to do a Pharaoh shuffle, it's going to be very, very difficult because of the way the cards are cut. So you're going to cut. You're going to hold the cards in your right hand, just like this, in this sort of grip. You're going to hold the cards in your left hand. Again, not in the straddle grip. You're not pressing anything too much, but your pinky is going to be underneath, because what's going to happen is that you're going to put very even and light pressure with the cards as you weave them back and forth. Now, what's going to happen in the beginning is that you're going to put too much pressure, and that's going to damage the cards. So once you develop an even, fair touch, what's going to happen is that by putting a little bit of pressure and doing a little bit of a weaving action, you're going to notice that the cards themselves are going to want to coalesce with each other and get into this sort of position where they're riffled inside of each other. That's not going to take a lot of work on your end. And in the beginning, you're going to want to overdo it. My best advice is to underdo it. So do a very light pressure. You're pressing into two corners, just like this. You're pressing into both corners. You're pressing in the upper left corner to the lower left corner. That's pretty much my best tip for doing this. And you're going to weave the cards back and forth ever so slightly. You don't want to do it too much. And you're going to notice that the cards are going to want to weave against each other. You don't want to fight against that. You want the cards to naturally coalesce with each other. So what's going to happen eventually is that when you're doing the shuffle, the cards are going to start coalescing naturally. In the beginning, they're going to come in clumps. So what's going to happen is that the cards are going to weave themselves together in clumps. However, if you just keep practicing, you're going to be able to get the cards. Not necessarily a perfect Pharaoh, but it's going to be pretty close itself, at least in the beginning or in the middle. So once again, I'm just pressing the corners with each other. I'm putting light pressure. I'm almost letting a little bit of pressure go with both thumbs and letting the cards just naturally weave into each other which allows me to weave them in and squeeze them together. Now, in order to do that cascade, what's going to happen is that you're going to have a very even distribution of cards. You don't want a perfect distribution, but you want a very even distribution. And you're going to use your thumb and your middle finger to put pressure. So notice that the pressure is also being put by my forefinger in the back here, but I'm going to put downward pressure, almost like I'm squeezing a small puppy, for lack of a better example. But you're going to squeeze both the top and the bottom of this situation and putting pressure with your forefinger, which is going to allow the cards to cascade inside of the hand. Now, you don't need to have massive hands to do this. My hands are really, really small, so don't think that hand size is a limitation to this. You're just going to put pressure with the forefinger. I'm bracing the cards with my fingers on the side, and I'm squeezing down. You see this? So that when you squeeze down, what's going to happen is that that card is going to release, followed by the next card, followed by the next card. And that's going to be a very natural action that the cards are going to want to release after each other. Now, of course, the left hand is there just to make sure that the cards don't fly everywhere. Now, the Pharaoh Shuffle is a very useful shuffle in a lot of tricks, and there's going to be a couple of different ways to do the Pharaoh Shuffle or do the same actions as a Pharaoh Shuffle, however, without the difficulty of it, which we're going to cover in different tricks later on. So the next and last shuffle that we're going to cover today is known as the swing shuffle. This really doesn't have a name. It doesn't really have, effect in the lore of Magic, but it's one that I like doing. And it's just a swing. It's the same thing as an overhand shuffle, same thing as a Hindu shuffle, but from swing cuts. So you notice that I'm doing the same action as a swing cut. I'm just doing the lift from the swing cut that we talked about in one of the previous lessons. That's going into the left hand. And I'm doing this continuously, just shuffling off different packets onto the left hand, just like this. This I just call the swing shuffle. I use it for a couple tricks, which is why I'm bothering showing you guys this particular shuffle here. But you notice that it's a very even distribution of the cards. It's the same action as a Hindu shuffle. It's the same action as an overhand shuffle. The only difference is that for this one, you have a little bit more control onto the cards themselves. So the trick that I'm going to show you guys today is going to be something using a particular principle, which we're going to delve into deeper in a future lesson. However, for this lesson, it works perfectly because it's exploiting one of the properties of a couple of the shuffles that we talked about in today's video. So the way the trick looks like is that you're going to shuffle the cards in this sort of way, and you're going to have the spectator call stop anytime they want. Let's say they call stop right there. You show them the card that they happen to stop to, and you very fairly put the cards on top of each other, and you show that there's no sort of control on your end. You're not really keeping any sort of breaks. You're not bending any sort of the cards. But even under these conditions, you could even have the spectator shuffle the cards in the overhand style. You're still able to look through the deck, and you're still able to find the spectator's card without any sort of issue. Now, the way this is done is using the key card principle. And there's going to be a lot of different ways to exploit this sort of thing. But the reason we can exploit these with these shuffles is that if you notice, in the Hindu shuffle, the bottom card doesn't change position. So if the Ace of Spades is on the bottom and we're doing a Hindu shuffle, that bottom card does not change. Same thing with an overhand shuffle. We're overhand shuffling the top packets. That bottom card is still the Ace of Spades. Even so, with the swing shuffle, you notice that that card is still there the entire time. So we could do any one of those shuffles, and we have the spectator call stop anytime they want through the course of any one of these shuffles. It doesn't really matter. We're going to show them the top card, just like this. So in this case, it's going to be the 5 of Spades. Because we know the identity of the bottom card, that's going to be our key card. That's going to be the card that allows us to find the spectator's cards. So the card's on the bottom, you know the identity of it. The way you could do this is that in the context of doing a shuffle, you can notice what this card is, let that card go first, continue the shuffle, and now you know the identity of the bottom card. So you have the spectator call stop. They look at this card over here. I'm going to keep this card face up. In this case, our key card is going to be the Jack of Diamonds for now. So the 3 of Spades is the spectator's card. You very cleanly put that half on top. And now, because of the nature of an overhand shuffle, you could have the spectator do one overhand shuffle, and it's not usually going to affect the key card. If you notice, let's spread through. You notice that the key card is still going to be right next to the card that the spectator picked, which in this case is the 3 of Spades, which is a very interesting principle to exploit. You can have them do more overhand shuffles. You can have them do more Hindu shuffles. They do that. For this particular method, they can't do a riffle shuffle. So you notice that a spectator has shuffled the cards like this. That's the sort of spectator you would hand the deck and have them do the particular cut for this. So as far as this trick, it's mostly presentation. And the worst thing you could do for this type of key card trick is have the spectator look at a particular card. In this case, the 3 of spades. My key card is a 9 of clubs. The worst thing you could do is have them shuffle, take it back, spread through, and find the card. That's the absolute worst thing you could do. So how do we dress it up? Well, we dress it up by pretending that you have read their mind, supposedly. So the easiest thing to do is, one more time, you have the spectator call stop. This time it's the 8 of diamonds. I've peeked at the 7 of hearts. The spectator can cut the cards as many times as they want. They could give straight cuts as many times as they want. That will not interrupt anything. But they could do one overhand shuffle without disturbing the order of those cards. You could spread through. I actually forgot what the key card was, though. We'll do another one. Ace of spades, which I'll keep face up this time. And the card is going to be the king of diamonds. So that card gets on top. So now upon taking the deck back, you go, man, you really mixed this deck up pretty well. In the context of that, all I'm looking for is my key card. Because I know what my key card is, I know the card to the right of it is going to be the spectator's card. Because if you remember, because the card was on the bottom and because the spectator's card is on top, that card goes on top of the spectator's card. So I go, man, you really shuffled this card. I'm looking for my key card, which is the ace of spades in this case. I'm looking for the key card. And that tells me the card to the right of it is going to be the spectator's card. So what you could do at this point is that you spread through, you notice the ace of spades, you look at the card next to it, remember it, and turn the deck face down as you hand the deck back to the spectator and go, man, yeah, I don't think this is going to work. I'll tell you what, let's do this without the deck. Think about your card and say it over and over in your head, all right? Let's see if we could do this. Look at me. Your card is a red card. Nailed it. All right, think of the actual overall card. Just try to send it to me. King of diamonds, just like that. So what you're able to do is reveal a card that they pretty much thought of without any work on your end. You know, all you're doing is noticing the bottom card, using that as your key card. They could look at this card, they could stop whenever they want. And of course, in that, you're able to very cleanly read their mind without much work, just exploiting the principles of a shuffle and the nature of a shuffle itself. So in that, you have a very effective trick with a key card. You have a very simple trick and a very powerful trick. So make sure not to dismiss it just because it's a simple trick. Imagine what's going on in a spectator's mind. They picked any card they wanted, and you were able to find their card or supposedly read their mind even after they shuffled the cards or even after they cut the cards. That's a strong effect. So that was the lesson. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you guys got something out of that, even if you might be an old cookie in the world of Magic. I'll see you guys on the next lesson where hopefully we can start with the more complicated shit.